Okay, folks, I'll say it again in case you are just joining us. My name is Deborah Shushan of J Street, and I'm going to be the host for today's Partners for Progressive Israel webinar. We are still waiting for our guest of honor, Tamar Zandberg, member of Knesset from the Meretz party. We anticipate that, it looks like she should be joining us any second here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Tamar, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Tamar with us. Wonderful. Okay, I'm just going to give folks another minute to join before we officially get started. So Tamar and all of our viewers, if you could just hang tight one more minute and we'll be getting started, everybody. Okay, it looks like we are going to be getting started now. Hello and welcome to everyone joining us from around the world, whether you're here in the United States or Israel, Palestine, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to our latest webinar briefing that is hosted by Partners for Progressive Israel. Partners for Progressive Israel, you may know if you have joined previously, hosts monthly webinars. And those include the Conversations with Israel and Palestine series, which brings voices from Israel and Palestine to an American audience and provides an important link between progressives in the United States and in the Middle East. My name is Deborah Shushan. I am the Director of Government Affairs at J Street. For those of you who know me, you may know that I was until recently at Americans for Peace Now, and recently made the jump over here to J Street. You see Washington, D.C. behind me in the distance, so I'm joining you from the U.S. Capitol. Before I introduce Tamar, our guest of honor today, let me take care of a few housekeeping measures. First thing is I want to tell you just a little bit about Partners for Progressive Israel, if you're not familiar. It is an American nonprofit 501c3 organization. It's dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, and believes in the need to ensure civil rights, equality, and social justice for all of Israel's inhabitants. It seeks to deepen Americans, and especially American Jews' understanding of Israel's complexities in order to enhance their ability to advocate for a progressive future for Israel. Now, Partners for Progressive Israel, as well as my own organization, J Street, are part of the Hatikva slate, which is running in the World Zionist Congress elections. Voting is now online. It just began today. And so I would encourage you to vote in the elections. You can do so by going to azm.org/elections. And there you can register and vote Hatikva. If you're watching us through Zoom, you will be getting an email reminder about this soon. These elections are important. We're talking about a budget of $5 billion over the 5 years that these slates, those who are elected, will serve. And that money is really important. Some of that money goes to support settlements and occupation. And if you are interested in a progressive Israel, a pluralistic Israel, and an end to occupation, you can impact that. If you're American or from the diaspora around the world, you can't vote in the Israeli elections we'll talk about today, but you can influence what's going on in Israel and the occupied territories today by voting in these important elections. And I would encourage you to do that, and especially to vote for the Hatikva slate. Okay. Having said that, I am excited now to introduce you to today's speaker. Tamar, can I just make sure that you're still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. You are. Okay, I didn't see your picture, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so let me introduce Tamar to everybody. I'm sure for many of you, she'll need no introduction. She is a member of Knesset and the former chair of the Meretz party. She has represented the Meretz party in Knesset since 2013 and has been chair of the Committee on Women's Rights, as well as a member of the Finance, Affordable Housing, and Gender Equality Committees. Recently, she was behind an initiative to allow public transportation on Shabbat, and she has long been a part of the Israeli movement to support Palestinian statehood. She is, in addition, a former member of the Tel Aviv-Yafo City Council. So, member of Knesset, Tamar Zandberg, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really delighted to have you. Okay, I promise. Thank you. I promise our last housekeeping item. I want to promise you in the audience, everyone who's joining us today, that we will have opportunity for question and answer period. We'll have at least 20 minutes to take questions from our video audience. I encourage you to submit your questions at any time. All you need to do in order to submit your questions is to look at the bottom of your monitor, for those of you joining us through Zoom, for the icon that reads Q&A. You may need to touch your screen or run your mouse over the screen, and then you click on the icon, the Q&A icon, and type your question in the small box that appears. The webinar will not disappear or be disrupted. Please note that viewers' microphones are turned off and that questions can only be asked, when typed in this way. Okay, so we're going to get started. Tamar, did you want to begin by offering any remarks, and then I'll be happy to throw some questions your way, or would you like to get started directly with questions?
Just to welcome everybody and thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to brief and have a chance to have a conversation about what's happening here. Things are always hectic, and in general in politics now, we just recently, just in the last hour, heard Gantz, our actually recommendee for being prime minister, declaring he will support annexation of the Jordan Valley, which is something that worries us a lot. We might elaborate on that later on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Of course, the main news on our side is the unification or the joint run or the joint ballot of Meretz and Labor. Mm-hmm. Something that many people have been talking about for long, and now is finally happening. So that's the main news for us. We hope to get a better and stronger left this time in elections. And we are also running together for the WZO that you mentioned. The election started today. So there we have a joint list and a joint faction together with J Street and NIF and some other very important American supporters of our cause. So that's, you have all of us in one ballot already. Now we will have that in the March elections here in Israel, and that is something we are very excited and hopeful about. And yeah, let's go to the questions. You know, it's election time. We're 40 days before elections. We don't have time for too much talking.
Fair enough, Tamar. Fair enough. Absolutely. Okay, so why don't we get right into it? I think what I'd like to do is begin with kind of a general question by way of getting us into the subject of Israeli elections. As I'm sure most of our viewers are well aware, Israel is about to go to elections for the third time, which is unprecedented. Going to elections for the second time is unprecedented, and here we are in preparation for third elections, which will be held on March 2nd. So Tamar, I wonder if you may give your thoughts to our viewers on what on earth is going on in Israeli politics. Why can't any grouping of parties get together and form a coalition? Why can't the anti-Bibi forces form a government if they have a majority?
Well, that's a very good question, and many people ask, what the hell is going on there? And really, third elections in 1 year is unprecedented in Israel, and maybe also many other places. For sure, this is a symbol of, some people call it instability or even a crisis of democracy. And I'm sure it is true, but the thing is that we have got to a much larger crisis in Israel as we see it on two aspects. One is on the corruption track, and Prime Minister is also unprecedentedly under three very serious indictments. One of them is bribery, which is, of course, an unacceptable situation in any democracy. And yet he's not willing to let go and resign, and like I'm sure many leaders in democracies would do, and manage his legal businesses as a citizen. And instead of that, he's hanging on to his chair as prime minister with a coalition around him that is a coalition of 55, but not a majority. So he lost his majority during the two previous 2019 elections. Actually, these are good news for us, because alongside the corruption and indictments, Netanyahu has also led in the last few years, and growingly so, and maybe reached to a negative record during the last year, a policy that is very, very dangerous to the future of Israel, going with very laws and bills that promote and expressions and populism that promotes racism, fear, hatred, and of course, I think the record is the threats of annexation of some parts of the West Bank. Now, really recently, in the recent hour, they're talking very concretely about annexing the Jordan Valley, but also some of the sea areas, the entire West Bank. Some of them talk, we don't really know, but growingly so in the last 4 or 5 years, the discourse of peace and agreement and negotiations step down, and the political discourse is filled with talking about annexation, which is a very, very dangerous and worrying development. So in that reality, as a matter of fact, I always say that going to third elections is the least worst option if you compare it to the immunity, corruption, annexation coalition, which is the other alternative that we see. It's something far away, it's something very, very concrete. And as a matter of fact, I think that the center-left Jewish Arab bloc is actually in a better starting point than in maybe years, maybe even decades, because many people are fed up with Netanyahu's, and again, it's a combination of corruption and policy that makes the extreme right-wing situation so dangerous and so worrying for many. And we hope to either get a 61 majority alternative to Netanyahu's, or at least increase the majority to make it impossible to form a Likud, extreme right, ultra-Orthodox coalition, and to force a center-left, even a minority. I mean, even one that does not have the 61 majority in the Knesset, but is significantly bigger than the right. This is our goal from these elections.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Tamar. So I want to follow up. There was a lot there, a lot of meat in what you just said, and I want to follow up on some of those points. So let's turn first to the corruption issue, which you raised. I wonder if you might say a little bit more. We know, of course, that Netanyahu has been indicted on these 3 serious charges. Could you tell us a little bit more about Netanyahu's current legal status, and specifically how it is that he can continue to serve even while under indictment?
Yeah, this is a question we ask ourselves every day. The answer is not very obvious, because we thought he should have stepped down and resigned himself. Once some of us even thought once the investigations started, that's about 2 years ago. For sure, once it got clearer what is he accused of, the things were widely published in the media. And definitely once the indictment was being served from the general attorney to the court and the Knesset. Unfortunately, it's not, I think maybe similar to the US, it's not his duty, like legally, to resign. For sure, that would have been the right thing to do. The reality of a leader of a democracy serving while needing to deal with with the trial actually going on, not to mention in a very complex place like Israel. And also we see that he has to pay a very high political price to win his partner's support. And he needs the support not just to form a coalition, not just to perform his policy, but to personally be, for example, the question of immunity from the Knesset is now strongly on the table. And this coming Tuesday, actually a week from today, the plenary of the Knesset will be assembled in not for a regular hearing, because it's in the middle of election recess, but it will be formed specifically to discuss the question of Netanyahu's immunity. This is a privilege that an elected Knesset member is entitled to, given that in order to make our public and parliamentary activity free of political accusations, or sometimes that if people want to prosecute politicians, they use false accusations. So this is what immunity is meant for. Of course, it is not meant for keeping you from corruption, severe indictments. But he is trying to do so, and you see even the talks about annexation or other promises he makes to the extreme right and settlers, for example, come from his need to keep their support around his immunity. So you see how this is a very, very concrete question. It's not that just that his mind is being occupied with other issues, but also this is directly affects the way that this government is being run. And this is, of course, not what the fundamentals of democracy is meant for, but he uses, or maybe I would even say abuses, the privileges of democracy that are meant to keep it in order to undermine it. And this is a true danger.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that a little bit more and pursue that connection that you just made between Netanyahu's drive for immunity with annexation, right? At this point, that's kind of old hat, right? That for some time, Bibi was dangling the promise of annexation to the extreme right wing in order to gain their support for annexation. And you had people like Bezalel Smotrich early on declare that he was willing to support immunity in exchange, right? That tit for tat promise. Things are, and that was bad enough, right? But now things appear to be getting ever more serious, right? You have Bibi talking about annexation of the Jordan Valley, perhaps even before elections. He's talking about annexing not just the Jordan Valley, as if that's not bad enough, but also all settlements. You have him welcoming and pushing for the release of the Trump so-called peace plan, which looks like it's going to be more like an annexation plan. And you have meetings that are about to happen with Jared Kushner, who will be in Israel in the coming days, who is expected to meet not only with Netanyahu, but probably with Benny Gantz as well. Benny Gantz previously, even though the Blue and White Party had not opposed annexation of the Jordan Valley, in fact, when Netanyahu floated the idea, you had Blue and White saying, wait a minute, we had the idea first. But at least Gantz had said that release of the Trump peace plan before the election would be electoral interference. The latest is that Gantz is saying, bring it on. Let's have the release of the plan. So we're having a lot of developments emerge quickly that would lead a lot of people, I think, to be really concerned that the clock toward annexation appears to be moving forward quickly. And I would just really love for you to share your thoughts with our viewers on how dangerous do you feel that this situation is?
Yeah, so I think you are right to point that this is a development that also has to do with the U.S. policy towards the Middle East, and also maybe not connected. I mean, you would probably know that better than me. Not disconnected from the internal politics in the U.S. and upcoming elections in the end of the year.
Right.
We are worried, and one of the things that we are worried about, that the U.S., no matter what administration, was always, first of all, in support of Israel, and also, at least in the last decades, in support of the two-state solution, and saw itself as a facilitator and a moderator between the sides, and excuse me, the peace camp always relied on the US and also other international support for trying to move things forward. The last time it happened was with the Kerry talks in 2000 and during the Netanyahu's government, by the way, when he appointed Tzipi Livni to be in charge of these talks. Now we are worried that there is a huge change, and it's not about bipartisan or even a binational. I mean, it's between the relations between the two countries or the two states, but that the right wing or the extreme right wing, and even I would say the settlers movements positions are being supported by the administration, and the result is by the U.S. And the question of, we remember the expression, one state, two states, three states, four states, we don't know. Now we see that we at least we are worried that this idea would go into policies that are being discussed right now. We don't actually know what's in the plan or the, let's call it the Trump paper. We don't know what it will include. We are worried that it will include some parts of annexation, or at least legitimation to annexation at some dressing, or this way or the other. We are worried in the crumble in the idea of the two-state solution and the principles that it is based on, among them borders and land swap, and the idea that it should be agreed between Israelis and Palestinians with the back of the international community, and especially the Arab world and the Middle East. This is important for the Israel's security, for the stability of any arrangement, of any future arrangement, and of course for the peace and security here. The last 18 months has been very unrest here with the Gaza Strip, some violence towards the West Bank, and of course, what used to be called the peace process is totally stuck, and there is no status quo here in our region. It's always rollback. It's always deterioration when there's no progress. And in that atmosphere, the position of blue and white as an alternative to Netanyahu's leadership is worrying, because we feel that there is the center left camp as a whole is dependent on the Meretz labor position to show and clearly present the alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Blue and white are unfortunately, some of us say they're dragged, some of us say it's an internal political game. We don't really know, but the presence of annexation so strongly on the table is not only worrying but dangerous as we see it. We warn blue and white not to play with this card, because some political analysts in Israel say that this is like a chicken game, between,
Right.
okay, you annex, no, you annex, no, let's see how would you annex. And, this is something that seriously puts the peace agreement with Jordan in danger. This is something that seriously hurts the chances of a viable future Palestinian state. And we know that our job right now is just to keep the window open. This is something that will definitely encourage instability, maybe even violence. Will have a strong implications on the relations within Israel between different communities and the Arab Jewish fragile conversation. And it has so many dangerous implications that truly I'm terrified by the option. And the fact that it is being thrown so easily by a center candidate is very worrying. Actually, given the timing of 40 days before election, we actually hope that our strength will be stronger, so we can influence where will blue and white go, which path will they take. Will they join Likud and right in legitimizing annexation and actually performing a right-wing policy, maybe without corruption, in the best scenario, or they will go with the natural coalition and with their voters actually, and join Meretz Labor and the Arab the joint list to a coalition that will actually present an alternative.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we are in worrying times indeed. There's no question about that. So we have quite a lot of questions. I'm pleased to see that are already being submitted. And I don't want to wait too long to get to questions. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remind folks once again how they can submit their questions, as many have already done, which is wonderful. Here's your reminder. If you're watching the webinar and you have a question, you can type it into us. You simply look at the bottom of your monitor for the icon that says Q&A. You may need to touch your screen or run your mouse over it. Then click on the icon and type your question in the small box that appears. Again, all of your microphones are turned off, so questions can only be asked in this way. We will do our best to put as many of these questions as possible to Tommy Zandberg. If I could ask also, if people could keep their questions as short as possible, that would be helpful. Okay, so one thing, Tamar, that I definitely wanted to ask you about, and I can see as the questions are coming in, is a topic of much interest, is the merger between Meretz and Labor / Gesher. Those two parties, of course, merged before the last elections. So let me just remind folks that one key facet of the Israeli parliamentary system is that there is a minimum threshold that all parties have to win at least 3.25% of the popular vote in order to be represented within the Knesset. And unfortunately, polling was showing that both Meretz and Labor/Gesher were somewhat precariously close to falling under that threshold. So we have a combined slate between these parties in advance of the election. And so, Tamar, if you could clarify for our viewers the nature of this combined slate. Should we be thinking of it as a merger? We hear sometimes the phrase technical block. What is that? What will happen after the elections? Will Meretz ever run again independently? Explain to us what's going on here exactly.
Okay, so as you said, we actually joined together on one slate, which means there will be one note, to put in the ballot for the two parties, these elections. I would say it's not a merger. I mean, it's not a new party. It's not something, it's like Meretz still exists and Labor still exists. On the other hand, I wouldn't call it a technical block either. I would say that this is joint forces for very dramatic and not easy elections for us, but also a great opportunity to the future to actually, Meretz has always been a very coherent, strict, and clear ideological party, and Labor used to, it actually shrink from being a party that sent a candidate for prime minister to another small left-wing party. So it only made sense to join forces together and have a stronger front to present to our voters, which are the left-wing supporters. I mean, we do have some voters or some supporters still voting blue and white because of a strong eager they have to vote for the next prime minister. Obviously, that this is the system in Israel is different from, I mean, it's not a bipartisan system. You don't vote for the president or the prime minister, but you form a coalition. But the need, even I would say, of voters to vote for the bigger party also exists here, and we had to do something to immune ourselves from that trend. And I think that joining forces with Labor, even despite the differences between the two parties that do actually exist, and we cannot deny them, would be, first of all, the best thing to deal with the changing political reality, but also a very good option for our voters who with time could not understand why they need two parties in two different slates that represent largely similar agenda, being the left of Israel. So we were able to do that. We're proud of that because it's not easy combining two such existing parties with legacy, with history, also with future. Mm-hmm. I'm sure two parties could run together in the future, could run separately in the future. I think right now it's too early to call whether, which way it will go. I think the first thing we need to do is to be a part of victory in these elections, and then we can know more, what the future will hold for us.
Okay, all right. So let's push a little bit further on the issue of merger. I'm looking at the questions that have been submitted, and I see that you're getting some pushback here regarding the merger, and some of those questions are pushing back specifically on the issue of an Arab-Jewish partnership. Yeah. And so let me kind of put together a couple of those questions. We have Andrea Fiano who writes in and says, Tamar, the alliance between Meretz and Avodah has alienated many Arab supporters of Meretz. The last time one of the mandates of Meretz came from the Arab sector So how do you feel about that? And could these votes move toward the joint list, which is also, you have Ayman Aude, the head of the joint list, talking about that list becoming more of a genuine Jewish Arab party possibly in the future. Paul Sham of Partners for Progressive Israel also writes in a similar vein that many American supporters of Meretz wish that it would have moved left toward being more of an Arab Jewish party. Do you think that after the election, this may develop organizationally, and how might that begin to happen? So also, if you could fold into this, Tamar, discussion of the fact that Isawi Frage has been placed low on the Meretz Avodah joint list. He's at number 11. So if you could address this issue of Arab-Jewish partnership, I think there's quite a lot of interest in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very important issue and very good questions. Actually, coming out of the April elections, when I personally actually was the chair of the party, we found out that Meretz has actually become the joint Jewish-Arab partnership party, having about 25% of our voters coming from the Arab community in Israel, from the Arab minority. And we saw that as a huge achievement because after 2 decades of voting separately and basically having a divide in Israeli politics, especially in the left, I mean, maybe you will not expect something else from the right, but in the left, you know, the question of equality and being judged as a citizen over citizenship and not over ethnicity or nationality is one of our principles. Not only that, moreover, but also we saw that the years of divide in politics were also the years of racism, of legislation against the minorities, of the nation state law, of not being able to achieve peace and two-state solutions. So I think these things are strongly connected because if the right wing has a majority among the Jewish population, if we base our politics on citizenship and equality, we are actually a majority in the Jewish Arab. I mean, if you take everybody in as expected from a vibrant democracy. We kind of expected, but the thing is that the political reality kind of, you know, has life of its own. And Meretz found itself in the Democratic Union merger last election, which was successful only up to a point, and also did not answer the expectations that we had. And this time, in even harder elections, we are proud and pleased with the Labor, you know, joint running together. It's true that the order of the candidates on the list kind of, even I would say, made it against our will. I would say, you know, number 5 in Meretz became number 11 in the joint list, and vice versa. I mean, this is something that everybody pay a price, and the result is not ideal in that sense. I mean, because Isawi Frage, him personally, who is really my friend, and I actually was involved in his being elected in democratic elections so high on the Meretz list in a very real position, was pushed back because of the having to, you know, retrench the 2 lists together. I think still Jewish-Arab partnership is something that has no replacement. I mean, this is one of our basic principles, not only ideologically, but also politically and electoral. I mean, we have votes there. And if we don't make the most out of it, we would both sin to our role in Israeli politics and also lose votes. very simple. I think this is a victim or a price we paid for for going together with labor. I can optimistically report that there is a strong understanding among all of us, including the leaders, Amir Peretz and Nitzan Horowitz, in the importance of that idea, and in the fact that we'll do anything we can, even during the campaign, together with Isawi Frej and all our partners in the Arab community, to overcome this price and to make that alliance strong.
Do you anticipate that what was in the last election, the Democratic Union, will lose support now that the mergers happened to the joint list?
I have to admit, unfortunately, that Meretz already paid that price going from April to September elections. We dropped to about a third of our support. So unfortunately, that already happened. So now our challenge is to keep even a little bit stronger than what we had in September. But the large price we paid was between April and September, and that damage has already been done, unfortunately. I think in the future we'll need a stronger and better partnership and a stronger and better move that would actually make it about a Jewish-Arab alliance rather than just one candidate in the list. Mm-hmm. I think that will have to wait till after these elections. I hope we won't lose any more support. Again, given the fact that we already lost most of it during the 2019, between the first and second elections, and that's unfortunate. But I think that we'll have to work hard to keep, or maybe even gain a little bit support, but knowing that the true alliance that the equality seekers in Israel expect us is yet to come.
Okay, all right. So the next question that I want to ask, I want to draw a little bit on a question that was submitted actually by email ahead of this webinar by Ralph Seeliger, who asks specifically about Stav Shafir. And I want to use that and the fact that Stav Shafir does not appear on the joint list between Meretz, what was the Democratic Union, Labor, Gesher. And I want to use that as a jumping off point, actually, to talk about a related issue, which is the question of female representation in these lists and in the upcoming Knesset. I know this is an issue near and dear to your heart as a longtime women's rights and women's equality activist. Some folks here may have seen an article that was written on January 16th by Alison Summer in Haaretz, in which she says that Stav Shafir was the single biggest loser in the creation of these lists, along with female representation more broadly. I'm looking at the lists that were finalized, that were submitted by the various parties, and I see that in Likud's top 10, you have 2 women. In Kahol Lavan's top 10, the Blue and White Party's top 10, also 2 women, 20% in each of those 2 key parties. Meretz, for folks who are Meretz Labor, you have 4 women in the top 10, so almost at parity, but not quite. And interestingly enough, if you want to get to parity, you have to go to Yamina, to the right-wing party. They are at 5 of the top 10, and actually their entire list is 11. They have 6 women out of those 11. So I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the issue of female representation in the submission of these lists, and also comment on Stav Shafir and her role and the result for her in not being included specifically.
Yeah, so first of all, Stav Shafir is a prominent leader and a prominent Knesset member. And again, I think that the unification of Meretz and Labor had prices, and some people personally, unfortunately, pay the price. Among them, you mentioned Isawi Frej and of course Stav Shafir. I do think that this political move is bigger than any of us. And I know that even Stav herself and Isawi himself kind of took in, maybe they weren't happy about it and we weren't happy about it as a group, but it was, this move was bigger than any of us, and in the end of the day, it was worth taking for the sake of these dramatic elections and also for the long run. As for women representation, I totally agree. As someone who was also the chair of the party and took place after Zehava Gal'on, and of course our founder Shulamit Aloni is a very, very prominent woman in the history of Israeli politics. No question, the women's representation is in pushback, in deterioration, and I think it's a symbol for the status of women as a whole. I think we are in the midst of a worldwide backlash. I think you experienced that in the US as well, in politics and many other places. On this as a background, I think we have a lot to be proud of in the Meretz labor slate, because it's true that Yamina, if you count the women, it's 5 out of 10, but 4 of them are in the 7 to 8 to 10 spots. And being a very junior, not very senior woman, besides for Ayelet Shaked, who is actually the senior, who used to lead the party in the previous election and now was pushed back to 3.
And now, of course, we have no more female leaders of parties. All parties led by men now.
It's true. On the other hand, in the Meretz labor, you have 3 out of the first 6, and women that are, leaders that are like, take Orly Levy, for example, who is one of the senior women in politics, myself and Merav Michaeli, who you know. And I think that's, it's not just, of course, and counting women is important. Representation is very important. It's part of the feminist movement since forever. Actually, Meretz has an internal regulation to have at least 40 women representation, and I think it should be changed to 50% in the 21st century. This was very innovative in the 90s, but 30 years has passed, and we also need to move on. But still, there are points of, under the dark background in this regard, there are points of light, and and we lead them still. So,
okay, thank you. So the next question is going to come from Dr. Ayala Emetz. She wants to ask about strengthening the left, generally speaking, and she wants to know what are the plans for Labor, Gesher, Meretz to try to increase the pot of voters who might vote for the left, specifically through efforts in low-income neighborhoods and towns, perhaps also in what is traditionally referred to as the periphery.
So I actually think that this question is actually became a reality with this unification, because the goal of Labor and Gesher in the last elections was to go specifically to these crowds and these communities. And again, it was successful up to a point. I mean, it wasn't what they expected, like we didn't get what we expected. So we hope that with the joint, with the triple unification, we will able to achieve more for everybody. I mean, because this is the idea of left. It's about being presenting equality to all, justice, social justice, recruit the support of larger communities in the peace process, and of course solidarity with minorities, and among them women's rights, gay rights, of course Arab Palestinian rights, etc. So I think that this unification actually puts us in a better position for everything we have discussed. Yeah, sorry, it started raining and I have a very cute niece here.
Ah, welcome.
Yeah. So I think this unification puts us in a better position for all of these ideas to strengthen our policies in all of them.
Okay, great. So the next question is going to be a merger by me of a few different questions that that our viewers have asked related to Benny Gantz. Obviously, there are a lot of people who want to figure out who Benny Gantz really is. And so let me combine a few things. We have one question from Dr. Howard Sumka, who references an article yesterday by Anshel Pfeffer, who said that whoever wins in March will be a right winger. And he says specifically in regard to Benny Gantz that he's being recast in this election as a right-leaning, religious-friendly leader, and talking about him visiting the settlements. So is that who Benny Gantz really is? We have another question from Andrew Strauss, who references Commanders for Israel's Security, which, as you know, is made up of over 300 former Israeli high military and intelligence officials. They've talked about annexation of a threat. So the question is, how can Gantz and his party, which is, of course, led by these former senior military officials, ignore this by endorsing annexation? And the last question related to Gantz that I'll throw in here is from Eddie Ichis, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, who asks about the government's recent move to allow more workers from Gaza into Israel. Apparently Gantz opposes this. Why would that be if this is something that will ease the tensions with Gaza?
Mm-hmm. So I think the question about the commanders for security of Israel and the question of annexation we kind of discussed in the beginning. I want to take an idea or one thought from the three questions and combine them and say that this is the reason why. And sorry for, I know not many or maybe none of you can vote in the Israeli elections. So take that not just as propaganda, but as an analysis. The answer to these questions is the reason why we need a strong Meretz labor slate, and even on the expense a little bit of blue and white, because the question of where Gantz would go, what Gantz would do, will blue and white be just another or yet another right-wing Likud partners, only less corrupt, or would actually go to another way, will be determined by the strength of the smaller partners. If the extreme right bloc of Rabbi Peretz and Bennett and his partners would be bigger, maybe, yes, and this is the danger, blue and white will be dragged and will be tempted to go with them. If our Peretz, Amir Peretz, Nitzan Horowitz, and us will be strong enough, they will, even if forced, and this is politics, we're not looking for friends here. We're looking for political partners and for opportunities to perform and to express our policies. Even if forced to go with us and do the exact opposite, not annex, not be dragged after the extreme right, that would be our true victory, and it is possible. It is feasible. It is within reach. We have 40 days to do so, and the outcomes of last elections show that we weren't that far. The differences between the blocks was 57, 55 to with the advantage on our side, and we just have to
push that a little bit more and gain more enthusiasm, more turnout, more get out to vote in our places, you know, in the cities, in places where center left is stronger, where the Arab community, we are looking forward to a larger turnout this time, and these factors would actually help to keep Gantz where he should be rather than where he might be tempted to be against the interests of Israel. That's the challenge. It's very simple.
So, Tammy, I'm going to ask you one last question, building off your point there, and then we'll have to wrap up. The last question, you just talked about getting out the vote efforts and turnout, and I wonder if you might speculate for us, with this unprecedented third election, who do you think that benefits and hurts in terms of actually getting your people to the polls?
I'm a strong supporter in the thesis that says that our camp would actually, the center-left Arab camp would actually gain, because I think, and I feel it around me, that our voters feel that this is, you know, it almost happened 2 times, and there is a chance to like make it in the 3rd time. You know, 10 years we've been expecting that, and Netanyahu ended up prime minister without, you know, very easily. And now I think, you know, people feel it's very close, but you know, I'm just putting a star there, saying that it's not certain. We have to work to make it happen. Right now, elections are still a little bit far, even though it's 40 days from now. People are not yet very involved. We have to recruit, and we have to make engagement with our constituencies and drive them out to vote and raise the turnout, and you know, make them feel and energized and more enthusiastic about that. It can also happen in the right. I'm saying, I mean, this is what Netanyahu is trying to do. I think personally, his people are fed up. I mean, he has reached the ceiling. I mean, he has energized base, but I don't think it's growing. I think, if anything, it's losing. You know, it's dropping because of corruption and because of his personal style and his rhetorics that are getting more and more extreme and populist. But you know, it's not certain, and we do need, and if we are approaching the end, we do need all of you to chip in. All your relatives, if you are citizens, come to vote. If you have relatives here, friends, family, everybody, this is the most important thing to do in the 2nd of March, and help us win.
I'm just thinking of my Israeli friends and colleagues who have to buy so many plane tickets in order to vote in 3 elections, those who live abroad, obviously. Yeah. So it is time for me to bring this webinar to an end. It's been such a pleasure to have an opportunity to be here with Tamar Zandberg of the Meretz Party. I want to thank all of you. We've had so many people watch this webinar and submit questions, and I want to apologize genuinely to those of you whose questions didn't get asked. It's wonderful to have such an embarrassment of riches, so many great questions. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get to them all. And the last thing that I want to say is just to remind you once again, for those of you who are watching who are not Israeli citizens, and you say to yourselves, Oy Gewalt, what can I do to impact this situation? I want to remind you once again that you can vote for Hatikva in the World Zionist Congress elections. They are now underway. Please go to azm.org/elections to register and vote Hatikva. As a non-citizen of Israel who cares passionately about Israel, this is your way to have an impact on the ground there in Israel and in Palestine. And with that, this webinar comes to an end. Thank you so much, Tamar, for joining us today.
Bye-bye. Good luck.
Thank you. It's a wrap. Thanks, folks.